All right. Well, thank you all for coming today for our final DEPSIG session of the year. It's a pleasure to see you all. Our session is Reconnecting Beyond Screens, Fostering Active Classroom Participation. We, Maria Naidu, Mariella Matai, and myself, as co-conveners, noticed at our centres that there was a tendency for students to hide behind the screens and not engage. And we thought others might have the same problems, so made this the focus of our session today. And judging by the participants that we have, we can see that you agree with us. It has become quite an issue. So today's session will have our guest presenter, Vanessa Stafford, to explore the challenges and offer some practical strategies and solutions. Then we'll have two teachers kindly offering their own strategies, 3 in fact. And then once you've all had some input, you'll have time to get into breakout rooms to discuss your thoughts on what you hear today from the presenters. And finally, we want to briefly discuss what came out of the EA free conference workshop that we did and plans for 2024 that we want your thoughts on. So without any further ado, over to our guest speaker, Vanessa Stafford. Vanessa's the Director of Academic Learning at Kaplan Business School, Australia, and she's passionate about effective teacher training for those teaching to international students and has begun her PhD in the field of teacher identity, communities of practice, and pedagogical skills attainment that supports international students' learning needs. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your insights. Over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking about the PhD. It sounds so complicated when other people say it. So I'm so honoured to have been asked to do this today, because I actually haven't worked in the ELICOS world for 7 years. I was an English language teacher for about 10 years in Vietnam, and then back home at Holmes College, then Carrick Education, and then Kaplan bought Carrick Education, and I became a Kaplan English language teacher, which then led me to do my master's in learning sciences and technology, and I moved on to the business school side of things. Really sadly, we lost our English language portion of the business during COVID, but I'm happy to say that we've got now our Kaplan Business School ELICOS area, and hopefully that will grow in the future. So whilst I can't speak today from a practicing ELICOS teacher, I think as my PhD sort of talks to, I am a teacher trainer to 400 odd higher education educators, and they often don't have any teaching experience whatsoever. And I feel like we have an obligation to our 97% international student cohort to have teachers who have that lens when they walk into the classroom. So my professional development program really focuses on that English language and the international student challenge to learning. So let's move on to this point today. I have just read the September issue of the English Australia Journal, which was really interesting, but amongst its great contributions, so if you haven't read it, I suggest you do. There was a quote from Penny in the 10 questions section, which always is my favorite section, actually. And she was reflecting on the best advice that she could give to a new language teacher. And she repeated a bit of advice that a senior colleague had once told her when she was facing some challenging classroom experiences. So this is what he told her at the time. Don't look at yourself, look at the students. Think about what's going on with them. Are they learning? Are they motivated? Right? So we know, of course, that's great advice, because what that colleague was saying to her was be student-centered, not teacher-centered. And we have all looked at our students since the return to face-to-face teaching. We've observed what many of them are doing. And in some cases, it's not the actively engaged cohorts that we remember. Something has changed, and that's in the Kaplan Business School as well. So what we're hearing is students are making themselves small, hiding behind laptops and phones. They're using technology for language translation instead of what we want them to do, which is, of course, to go through messy social constructivist learning. And there are reports of students just not being as sociable in the classroom as they were before the COVID online learning experience. So that's a challenge for us educators. And if you found yourself in that situation, well, it's good that you're here, because we have some amazing panelists who are going to provide some real practical tips for you. But first, I'm going to get you to take a step back and take a broader perspective on this problem. And I want to embed a phrase in your minds that hopefully you'll recall when you're next lesson planning. And that is that students need to learn how to learn again. What do I mean by that? Okay, here's Dr. Jilly Salmon. If you can't Google her now, here's a mnemonic for you to remember her name. Jilly plus Salmon, you're welcome. Now, if you don't know, thanks for the laugh. If you don't know her, she's the guru behind the concept of building your community's individual and collective learning competencies before you even get to any content teaching. And she specifically has a model that I think is relevant today. Now, it is a model for collaborative online learning engagement, so bear with me. There's a point to this. She focuses on successfully transitioning students from face-to-face to online collaborative learning. But the principle of learning how to learn in this new learning environment is just as relevant for the reverse experience, transitioning back to face-to-face learning. So I'm going to show you her model, but as I hate putting up models in a very quick time frame because everyone's eyes go a bit crazy. So I just want you to focus on the 5 orange numbers from bottom to top and the learning area in white that they correspond to. So don't worry about anything else that's on the screen. Okay, so you can see that there are numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 is access and motivation, 2 is online socialization, 3 is information exchange, 4 is knowledge construction, and 5 is development. Now, it's a scaffolded learning approach whereby the content learning is achieved in steps 4 and 5, but the learning how to learn parts are 1 to 3. So let's look at this through just a simple ladder, right? In 2020, when we were preparing our students for online learning, we asked ourselves, and hopefully we asked them, these questions. So in 2020, for access and motivation, we were saying, okay, are they digital natives or digital immigrants? So how hard is it for them to do this? What's their Wi-Fi like? Where are they in the world? Do you want to study online? Are you excited by that or totally daunted? So the motivation, and who knows how to press the buttons that you need? So those were the questions we were asking. But we still need to ask questions because they're transitioning back. So in 2023, who lives close to campus? Who lives really far away? Who's coming into campus after a night shift? For example, who has funds for travel? So who is stressed out financially by coming back to campus? Who wants to study face-to-face? We're telling them it's better. They may not think it's better, right? So where's that motivation? For online socialization, we were asking them, have you studied online before? What do you prefer, cameras on or off? What's better for you, in our opinion? Do you like to use voice or text? Are you focused at home, or are you multitasking with a child or, with flatmates? Are you shy, outgoing? Now we have to ask ourselves similar questions in 2023. Have you studied on campus before? Maybe they're not transitioning back. Maybe this is their first time in higher education or an English language setting where they really aren't doing something online. Do they have the language confidence now to fail in front of others, right? Just sit for a moment and think that if you're asking an English language student to produce some language to boxes on a screen, mostly with the cameras off, then that sense, that fear of failure is less, because those people aren't real people, right? But if they're right next to you, they're real people. So is that social anxiety happening in your classrooms? And then in 2020, for information exchange, we're saying, well, do you know where to find all the stuff that you need to know online? And who do you want to get your information from? How do you get it? And do you naturally go to a teacher or to a peer from the same background as you? We're now absolutely having to ask them, do you know where stuff is offline? Do you know where the library is? Do you know where the student support officers are, the academic support staff? Are you comfortable asking a human next to you? And do you physically know the words to say? How often have our students been texting or doing abbreviated language online? And now we're actually asking them to use real sentences to real people in a classroom. We think it's obvious because we have done it for most of our lives. And there was a blip, a COVID blip, but that's not the experience of young people. Okay, so these questions are important to reflect on, or better still, to ask our students directly, so we know how much to help them to learn how to learn in this new face-to-face environment. So let's look again at Changuk and Laura. So they've come into your classroom, they've sat at the desk and opened their laptops to their online content. What have you done prior to this moment with your macro thinking and your lesson planning? So what have you done before they've done this to really help them? Hopefully you have considered those first three rungs of the ladder. So to build your community's individual and collective face-to-face learning competencies before you even teach the content. Because in the end, I implore you, students really do need to learn how to learn again. So thank you very much. Happy to discuss my concept of taking a step back.
Does anyone have any questions for Vanessa? We can take a question if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask, or feel free to pop it into the chat.
Yes, I can definitely respond in the chat as well if anyone wants to talk about Julie salmon or ladders or salmon.
Could I ask a question? Vanessa, you were mentioning that you were surveying students. Did you actually survey students about some of these ideas? And are you able to share any of that sort of the responses?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Microsoft Forms quite a lot at Kaplan Business School. And so they're not anonymous, but they're private to the teacher. And we actually ask them, what are your learning preferences? I think everyone titles their own forms differently, but I think mine was something like, how do I learn? And so, we literally asked those questions that were in the 2020 sections. They actually were real questions. What is your connectivity? What are your struggles? And so now I am trying to get the new cohort of teachers who weren't here in 2020, who are doing it automatically again. I'm trying to teach those new teachers that come on board every trimester through orientation that I run. I try to get them to also do the Microsoft form or a private email back and forth to really get the data, because I'm a real fan of using data to teach well. And you can only get that data if you ask your students what they're feeling and what they're thinking. So you can, and if you try and get the students to do it outside of class, it will never happen. You'll get 20% response rate, I can assure you. So make it an activity in class and you'll get more responses. And if I can just also say, you will get the people that you don't need to hear from, so that the 20% that are go-getters and really amazing, that they're fine, and you'll get the lower ones who are really struggling and actually do appreciate it, and then there'll be the middle section that are just, yeah, you know, I'm all right, and they either will try and get out of it, or they just won't give you any really juicy data. But that's okay, as long as you can get that bottom group that are struggling the most. That's my view.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I'm going to hand over to Maria, who's going to introduce our next presenters.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you so much, Vanessa. It's so good to be reminded not to operate on assumptions. So thank you so much for that. It was a great way to start the session. I'm really thrilled to welcome Gabby Lawson and to thank her for her time this afternoon. Gabby's an ELICOS teacher at Monash, for those of you who don't know her. Her presentation this afternoon is on Google Slides, activities, and role plays. Remember that idea? So thank you so much, Gabby. We're looking forward to this session.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't have much time. Let me just share my screen with everyone. Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a copy of the Google Slides in the chat because I have actually linked examples of everything onto the slides. So if you want an example of the role play I'm talking about, whatever, you can click. Hopefully, yeah, I can see people appearing now. So yeah, you can click on and you don't need to ask for a copy. It's in my private email account, so it shouldn't be any Monash restrictions there. Okay, let's get started. So we don't have much time. Oops. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so today we're going to look at games. I really like the point that was made earlier by Vanessa about the fear of failing in front of others. I think that's a really good point. So I think games are a really good way to avoid the problem of failing in front of others and get people off, like away from their laptops, while still using the Google Slides that are part of the blended learning setup. So we're also going to be using these, which are coloured Post-it notes, you know, students will also need board pens if you've got boards around the room. If you're not lucky enough to have that, you can do butcher's paper on the table or A3 paper on the table for some of these activities. Okay, so we're going to look at games with Post-it notes, and quickly have a look at role plays. I hope I can get through it all. Okay, so yeah, so the aim is to inspire you with some ideas for how to use Google Slides and some effective strategies for role plays. Okay, so let's start with how we use the Post-it notes. So you're all familiar with classroom rules, right? My class were previously doing this on a shared Google Doc where they would write, you know, how the students should treat the other students, the teacher should treat the students should treat the teacher, and the students should, you know, treat their room. But another way to do it would be to put each category, student to student, student to teacher, teacher to student, student to facility, on 4 different pieces of paper, and then ask the students to write their ideas on different coloured paper, but each table or group has a different colour. So you can, the participation from the teams is accountable. And then you can see in my picture that we've got, pink group, we're doing a really good job, yellow contributed something, but you can see that they've stuck the ideas, and then I've written up what they've said. So the advantage of this type of thing is that each group had to walk up to the front of the class and put their idea on. So they have to get out of their chair and walk, which brain-based learning tells us will actually improve their processing anyway. And it means they have to close their laptops and actually work as a team to do that activity. So that's just one example of how you can kind of move things offline. And obviously gamifying things is a great way to move things into team and group. It improves their memory. It stops them from playing computer games while they're working with other people, usually, hopefully. On tabs, they have to close their laptop and they're encouraged to walk or run. Okay, so let's start with my skimming and scanning game. So for this, you need shop bells. If you can get these from any store like Daiso. So if you've got one shop bell on each table, you can use it as a buzzer, right? So when they hit the bell to answer the question. So shop bells, a board pen, 3 parallel texts. So I'll show you. So these are my slides. So this isn't being used as a presentation. Each slide has one question on it, right? So the question is projected to the students and, just go close that. Right, and then I've got the 3 texts. So this one's about food, Australia's taste for meat, chocolate, 2 million Australians eat 2 million chocolate bars, 4 in 5 Aussies overindulge in junk food. So there's 3 parallel texts and I have an answer sheet with what I want them to scan for. So how much meat do Australians eat? So they have to scan each 3 texts for the answer, 92.57 kilos. And if one text is about meat, one is about chocolate, and one is about like children's lunchboxes, they know which text to scan in and they can find the answer to how much, how many, so what proportion. So they can kind of use their strategies in a game, and then they hit the bell and the team that answers the highest number of questions wins. But if someone is really bad at this and they're on a team, they're not going to feel like they're failing in front of others. So that takes away the sort of element of, oh, I'm hopeless at this, because their team might win and that will give them, that motivation that's fun. You can't lose as long as you as a teacher make sure that there's one good student on every team. Okay. So yeah, I've already said this. So they read the questions. When the student thinks they know the answer, they hit the bell, and if they're wrong, another team can try, and because sometimes they guess, and the team with the highest score at the end wins. So that's a simple one. So yeah, you can, if you 10, 20, 30 questions, it really depends on how long you want it to go for. Okay, so that is like a reading game. Okay, next one is, if everyone remembers grammar auctions, I have updated it to GBay, right? So in GBay, you will need whiteboard, pen for the teacher, printable money, so you can print the money out. I've put a link here for you. That's where I got these from. Keep the denomination small if you're bad at maths. Otherwise, you're making a hellscape for yourself trying to score the teams and subtract and add the points. Some classes get very, very excited by this game, so it's going to be loud, all right? So yeah, quite simply, they've got you reviewing any grammar that you do. Gabby is here, so it must be Wednesday. Correct or incorrect? The team has to decide. Then they can bid. They bid, $20. If it's correct, you double their money. If it's incorrect, they lose their money. Simple, right? Easy to prepare. Goes with any syllabus. Students love it. Recommend you do it just before the break though, so they have a little time to calm down afterwards. Okay, next one. Where are we? Yeah. Is, so that was GBay, right. Passives race. So we've all done this before where you write the sentence in active and then the team has to write the sentence in the passive. So you can either project the sentence on those Google Slides and they have to write the active together on an A3 piece of paper on the table, or if you want running, the other option is the old grass skirts, which I'm sure many of you will remember, where you put each team has like all this, the active sentences on something like this that you cut up, and you rip the sentence off and hand it to the student as they run up to the table, and then they have to run back with it, take it to the team. They make a passive, then the next student runs up and gets the next strip. So you've got 4 of these things going, sticky tape to the desk, going at the same time. So if you want running, you can do it that way. If you don't want running for health and safety reasons, you can do it with the Google Slides. Depends on, your students, how much space you've got in the classroom, how many charge cables there are, going to trip people over, that kind of thing. So, okay. Now, error correction code race. You can do this with an A3 piece of paper. You can put this on the Google slide, or you can blue tack it on A3 up around the wall. So they have to stand up, walk over, they get a red pen, they have to find the mistakes. Team that finds all the mistakes first and corrects them with the correction code, if you have one, or just corrects the mistakes if you don't do correction code at your school, is the winning team. Keep it simple though. If the games are too hard, they go slowly and the whole thing starts to sag like an undercooked cake. So it's important that it's just the right level of not too difficult. Keep it simple. Yeah, keep it doable. Okay. If you higher order thinking skills, inferencing, you can get them in teams with Google Slides. So I've got these pictures. I've given you a copy, hopefully. I just got them off the internet. So, you know, you can use them in your classroom, but you don't think you could put them on a curriculum thing. But yeah, so the teams have to write one inference about each photo together. If you wanted to introduce inferencing and you sort of gamify that and make that into like a game rather than just sort of make inferencing a little bit more team-based. Yeah, now this one is the brainstorming game. So, yeah, for this, you will need how am I doing for time, Sophie?
Yeah, it's probably time to wrap up soon.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, you're getting through it well.
All right, so yeah, I'll do one more game and then I'll move on to quickly do like one thing about role plays before we finish. So with the brainstorming game, I'll just look to this. So you start simple, like each team has these, right? And this is number one is on the Google slide and it's like, what are all the things you can do with a ball? Very simple. So they have to brainstorm like things you can do with a ball on Post-it notes, stick them on the whiteboards. Next thing round, how many things can you think of that are sweet, right? Simple. So now they have to put them into different categories, organize them into categories. What are methods of travel? So they have to organize that into categories with Post-it notes. And then we start with 4 and 5, we start moving up to the curriculum stuff, which is what should governments do to stop the impacts of climate change? So you're sort of taking a task where they have to brainstorm about climate change impacts and what you can do to stop it. But you start simple and you get more complex and you make it into a game so that it's fun. And it also helps them to do the more difficult one because they've got a technique they can use now. And also they're out of their chairs. Right, I'm going to skip that one. All right, so let's talk about role plays and then I promise I'll stop talking. So, yeah, so there are 2 types of role plays, in my opinion, transactional and critical thinking. The transactional ones, like going to a restaurant or going to a shop, they don't take a lot of setting up. But the critical thinking ones that we do in EAP or where they have to solve a problem, like someone's going to build a supermarket on a park and all the stakeholders have to argue about it, like in business English, or, you know, there's a new drug and you have to discuss that. That takes quite a lot of setting up. So I think the key for the role play is that you set it up. So here's an example of how to set up like an EAP type role play. So this role play is about appropriate technology. So the life straw is a thing that you can drink dirty water through that makes it clean. So in this role play, we've got 4 different pieces of appropriate technology: the life straw, the rocket stove, which is like a stove that you can use to cook something without using wood. This rolling thing, so people don't have to carry water like hundreds of miles and they can go to school instead. And this refrigerator, which is like a no electricity refrigerator that stops everyone from getting food poisoning. So each student has a different piece of technology. They have to read about it. They have to share that information together by talking and taking notes before they even get to the role play, right? And then when we get to the role play, so we've got this scenario now. There's a village, it's in a poor part of India, and each person, so they've got these different solutions that we just read about before, and each character, the World Vision worker, the counsellor, the doctor, and the village representative, they all have to discuss using these things how they're going to solve the problem for this village, right? So because it's been set up, it will work better. And then if you want it to work better again, you can repeat the task, like change the groups and repeat the task, change the groups, because the more times you repeat, the better it'll get. Like if you don't set it up well, they don't feel confident and they think they're going to have to perform it in front of other people. The role play might not work very well. So if it's well set up and they don't have to perform it in front of other people, you might have a bit more success. The other thing I would suggest for that is also, so you, instead of getting them to perform in front of the class, if that's going to make them nervous, instead get each student to write from the perspective of the character they played about what their character said. So there are many problems in the village. This was one of my students wrote this. There are many problems in the village. As a councillor from the local government and also a Hindu priest, I want to improve employment and education in the village. Now there are many young people that didn't get an education, so it's hard for them to get a job. Many young girls marry too young, and that makes their life harder. If the villagers are educated, then many problems can be solved, right? So instead of, like in the past, we always used to get students to get up and perform. But if you don't have time in the lesson to do that, or you think that that's actually going to make it more nerve-wracking for the students, then instead they can write from the perspective of their character, which is actually quite a good thing in terms of critical thinking. I've put another one on the slides, which is the Australian version of that, which is about a coal mine. So, you know, if you want to try either one of those yourself, I wrote them. Apologies for any typing mistakes, but those are connected to the cards. So there we have Google Slides. It's easy to use Google Slides. And it's easy to do role plays if you've got the time to set them up. Okay, thank you very much, Sophie.
Thanks so much.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Gabby. It was great to start us thinking more and more about some of those old games we used to have in our toolkit that we possibly need to dust off a bit, but also rethink them, which is really nice. Thank you, Gabby. I'm going to introduce Jonathan Vella and Anna Choi from University of Western Sydney, the college. We're very pleased to have you both. Thank you so much for coming along to share some strategies and practical techniques. I like that word. So we're looking forward to hearing about it and how you've actually scaffolded this approach. So I'll hand straight over to you, Jonathan and Anna.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. And thanks, Gabby, for all of your awesome ideas. It brings back a lot of memories when we were in the classroom pre-COVID. So as Maria mentioned, my name is Anna Choi, and my colleague Jonathan and I both work at the English language program that was continuing at the college. So pre-COVID, our college used a variety of printable resources and materials, and as we all know, COVID hit, and we had to go online with hybrid learning, and a lot of the materials became obsolete. However, once students returned to the classrooms, teachers faced the dilemma of whether to continue using these printable materials or also continue using the resources available online. So we came up with a possible solution. You could use a combination of both offline and online activities to optimize the strengths of each. So finding the right balance. So this is a scenario. You are asked to plan a lesson to review how to write a basic argument essay. How would you approach the lesson and what materials would you use? So the lesson that was taught is actually part of our English for Academic programs to review how to write a basic argument essay where students complete a joint deconstruction and analysis of a sample essay. As you can see in the picture, are bicycles better than cars? So the English proficiency level for these students would be equivalent of a 5+ IELTS academic or a CFR P1 level. So Jonathan and I have used a 3-stage approach to create a dynamic classroom environment. The first stage would involve a hands-on activity, and stage 2 would involve using a combination of both online activities with printable materials, and the third stage would include the use of the whiteboard. So as you can see in the pictures, in the first stage, students would work in pairs or groups to complete a joint reconstruction of a sample essay using cut-up sentence strips that have been jumbled. And then students put the sentences in the correct order. And the strips, as you can see in the picture, are color-coded according to each part of the essay. So the benefit of this activity, it's a hands-on activity. It allows kinesthetic learners to visualize the essay structure, and it initiates group discussion, and it also provides opportunity for peer feedback. And most importantly, what today's video is about, students are not glued to their screens. So we do try to get them to close their laptops, as you can see in the picture. However, there are some drawbacks to this activity because students may need to rely on guidance from the teacher, where sometimes immediate feedback is unavailable. So that's where I'll hand over to Jonathan, who will talk about stages 2 and 3.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Right, so as Anna mentioned, there are many different options for a jigsaw style task, in this case, to create to practice essay structure. So pre-COVID, we all used cutouts like this, right? Which we're coming back to. That was mostly what we did. Then when we started teaching from home, I don't know about you, but what I was doing was getting Word documents with different colored text paragraphs, sending them to the students, or possibly Google Docs and sharing it, and then putting them into their Zoom breakout rooms, like we'll be doing again later today. And in their breakout rooms, they've got to discuss with their partners and shuffle them around. This moved into where we started to use H5P. H5P is a tool for producing interactive content and video using a LMS. In our case, we use Blackboard. This can be, Anna, slide please. This can be quite useful because the activity doesn't require any extra materials. There's no printing, there's no cutting, and many different classes can use the activity at the same time. So sometimes if you've got many classes of the same level, only one teacher can use the cutout set or whatever, or everybody has to prepare their own stuff. So there are a lot of advantages to H5P. It also lets them learn at their own pace, gives instant corrections. They don't have to wait for teachers to go through the task with everybody, because they can find out the answers as they're up to it. It gamifies the lesson to some extent, but there are, of course, drawbacks, as we're talking about today, trying to reduce a little bit of this screen time. So it can lead to less interaction with peers. So even if you put them as a pair, you might get one student who's driving the laptop while the other is sort of just watching. So there's definitely disadvantages. What we found is that when we combined paper cutouts with H5P, students were a lot more engaged. They were using online game elements, so doing what they're comfortable and familiar with, using their screens, but at the same time using paper cutouts to look at the overall structure. Another advantage of using paper is that with H5P, when you have more than about 8, so say you had 8 pieces of paper, that's very easy to move around a table. But when you have more than 8 sentence strips online, especially with small laptops, it becomes very confusing, moving them up and moving them down. So when it's more complicated, it's much better on paper. So using paper is better because you can break the structure into little pieces. in this case, I'm not sure if it's on this slide or the one that she had earlier, you could see that, for example, the introduction to the essays might be all pink, and then the body paragraph 1 might be all blue, and then conclusion might be all green. And in that case, moving the paper around is a lot simpler, and then they can do it on H5P at the same time. So our method was to break the essay into parts, each with its own H5P, and paper sentence strips for sequencing. So for example, then the class can attempt to order each one on the H5P on paper first. So they order it on paper what they think is the answer. Then they move to their screens to check if they're right at their own pace. And then if they are incorrect, then they can then correct what they've done on the paper. In this way, the aim of the lesson, which is a better understanding of sentence structure in essays, is reinforced. The final stage, I think it was, as Gabby was saying before, gets them off their butts, gets them to go to the whiteboard, and they review the structure a final time and share with the class what they've learnt. We've tried both getting students to rewrite aspects of the essay on the board, and we've also put the completed essay, for example, on the left. You could see, just put the completed essay on the board using the projector, and then students can highlight different aspects. So what's the introductory sentences? What's the topic sentence? What are the controlling ideas? All of those sorts of things. The opportunity is also there, as you can see on the right, to get them to highlight key language from the text, such as signpost words, or identify nominalization, things like that. Yeah, overall, we found that blending the sort of old school cutouts with a more modern H5P task increases student engagement, encourages them to be more student-centered learning, and it also teaches the structures that they need for academic success within their classroom context. Thank you. Back to Anna.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just to recap and to sum up, our 3-stage guide, stage 1, it helps to implement a hands-on approach with printable materials to visualize parts of an essay. And then stage 2 helps to create a student-centered learning environment with online activities and printable materials for instant feedback. And stage 3 helps to boost student engagement and motivation with the whiteboard to demonstrate understanding of concepts. So that pretty much wraps our talk. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Anna and Jonathan, and thank you to all our speakers today for so many practical activities and tips as well. So it's time for you all, our participants, to interact a bit more actively with your colleagues. We're going to put you in a breakout room with some colleagues for 10 minutes. So if you were okay to do 10 minutes, yeah.
Yep.
And these
about
are
8 minutes. Yeah.
Sure, 8 minutes, yeah. These are the 2 questions that you'll be focusing on. And let me have a look. All right. So I've just summarized those. Meeting group chat, just a moment. Okay, I've just summarized those and put them into the chat. Can you just check that you can see them? So do you identify with or use any of the strategies that were, or activities that were presented by our speakers today? And 2, what other approaches, strategies, or activities do you use with your students so that they can interact and engage with one another, I guess, and the course content a little more? All right, so I'll open the breakout rooms and we'll give you 8 minutes. I guess we'll send a message when we're about to close the rooms, and we'll pop in and come and visit you as well. All right, there you go. Enjoy. Thank you all so much. From Vanessa, I think it was very enlightening to really think about what you need to do before you can start these activities. So for me, that was incredibly interesting and valuable, and something I'll take forward with my team. And to the others, Gabby and Anna and Jonathan, those activities were just incredible, and really thank you very much for that. So we just want to take a couple of minutes. When we were at the pre-conference workshop in 2023, we identified some potential topics, and we'd like your feedback on what your top 3 would be that we could present next year. So these are our topics. Different literacies, embedding Indigenous and Australian culture, giving feedback and how to do that, how to teach research and referencing skills, how to teach collaboration and group work, academic integrity, AI, all of that, and then individual skills or integrated skills. So reading, writing, speaking, listening, and grammar and vocab, and how do we teach these things? So we thought that's what might be of interest for this year. We'd love to do a very quick poll now and see what you think. So Sophie's going to set that up. If we can just ask you, what topic would you like to hear about the most in 2024? Just choose one. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Keep us in suspense.
I think everyone's responded now.
Yeah, I've just shared the results now.
It is interesting.
So the top being embedding Indigenous and Australian culture in different literacies. Fantastic. All right. So just one last thing. Thank you very much for that. What we'd also like to I'd like to very quickly talk to you about is an idea that we have, because we really want to engage more and more teachers to this direct entry program, SIG. We found it was a little bit too management heavy last year, perhaps, and we want to engage you all. So what we were thinking is to run some sessions, a couple of sessions throughout the year next time, where we do a similar thing to this, where we pick teachers and we get some teacher ideas and collaboration. So that is one thing that we were thinking we'd really like to move forward, is more engagement from our community. This SIG is for you. It's for you to engage, it's for you to get the support that you need, and we're really, really keen to make sure that that happens. It's also a chance for professional development if you're not comfortable speaking in a big room of people, but you're happy to do a 5-minute online session or a 10-minute online session, perhaps as a lead up to the English Australia conference that's in Perth next year that you might like to come for. That would be great as well. So how comfortable, can I just get a quick hands up, who would feel comfortable presenting and feel that that's a better way for us to manage our SIG? And if you don't feel comfortable being on the spot right now, we have a newsletter coming out. You can respond to that as well. Who might feel better that it's a good idea to have this as a teachers group? Yeah. Okay. Get some hands. All right. So start thinking about these topics perhaps, and some of the input that you could have on these topics for 2024. We would love to have your input. You're all a talented group of people, and we really appreciate the sharing and collaboration. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. Sophie, over to you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Just wanted to say a huge thank you to the conveners of the Direct Entry Program, SIG, Anne-Marie, Mariella and Maria, for organising this session, and indeed for organising all of the sessions this year. And thank you everybody for coming, and we look forward to engaging more with you in 2024.